Hello, friends. Thanks for spending some time with me tonight. My name is Jim Chancellor, and I'm a Vietnam veteran from 1969 and 70. And what I'm going to talk to you about tonight is several different issues. One is PTSD, another one is the moral injuries. We're going to touch on suicide and the importance of education on suicide prevention. I also want to share with you some things about homelessness. Now, I've been to war. I served with the 119th Assault Helicopter Company in Vietnam as a door gunner on a UH-1H helicopter. On February 21st of 1970, our helicopter started receiving fire, and we were shot down right through the trees in South Vietnam. The ship actually tumbled several times. We had to the co-pilot had a compound fracture of his leg, had a broken right wrist. The other door gunner on the right side had bitten his tongue off, but we all survived. We set up a small perimeter and waited until we got picked back up by another helicopter. Uh, I actually have experienced a lot of the emotions of war. I cried with the man as I saw him rocking his fellow soldier back and forth, telling him to hang on, you're going to make it. We're going to bird now, you're going to live. When we both knew that death was near. I laughed with a guy who showed me pictures of his kid sister, and he held it up and he just told me story after story after story. And I'd only met the man probably a week before. Then there were my constant prayers for me, my survival, my welcome home, my tour of duty, so to speak. So those emotions have been with me all my adult life, and they can be brought back to vivid reality with the slightest of sounds or smells or sounds or anything that brings me back to Vietnam. Now, the first thing I want to talk to you about is PTSD. Now, I really want you to hear one thing. If you hear one thing from me tonight that you remember, it's this. PTSD is an anxiety disorder. It's not something that's wrong with you. It's something that happened to you. So, instead of painting everybody with the same brush, just remember that PTSD is one, it's fear-based, and it's an anxiety disorder. War is not the only thing that can cause post-traumatic stress. It can be caused by, a severe car crash or some physical violence, domestic violence. It can also be caused by war, and it can be caused by rape. I've been talked to several times by professional people that said, "Jim, don't use rape in your presentation because rape is it's too brutal. It's actually too brutal. It'll turn people off." And I thought to myself, well, that might be a good idea, but can it be more brutal than war? And it I cannot testify one way or the other about rape. And I apologize to anyone who's ever been forced to do something that they didn't want to do. If they've been through domestic violence, I apologize for that because I've never experienced that. But split-second decisions in war itself, is something that I can relate to. Now, I flew with a friend named Jerry Clapp, and he was from Paducah, Kentucky. And we were very good friends in Vietnam, and we often flew together. And this particular day, we flew apart from each other. We were in different ships. And Jerry was called for an emergency medevac into a hellhole. Now, a hellhole is something where the infantry on the ground cut down trees just enough for the helicopter to come down very slowly into this hellhole, pick up the person they're going to pick up, and then very slowly go back up. They, because the foliage and the trees are so high that they have to do that for the helicopter to get down. Now, as Jerry was coming back up, he started to receive fire from the mountainside on his side of the ship, and he couldn't return fire. He couldn't protect the ship because he would shoot his rotor blades off. His M60 was on a post, and he could not return fire. So he tried to contact Lively on the other side. Warren Lively was his name, and he couldn't get into communication from Warren. So we went to him, and Warren Lively had taken a round through his neck and his chest cavity and out of his lower back. And the only medical training we had was compresses on the wound. So Jerry took compress on the entrance wound and on the exit wound, and he held on. And Warren Lively grabbed Jerry's wrist. So as they're coming up, they have to come up very slowly. They're receiving fire from above the tree, above the rotor blades. Once they got above the tree line, they could return fire and protect the ship. So the pilot says to Jerry, receiving fire at 9 o'clock, return fire, receiving fire at 9 o'clock. At that very split second, Jerry had to make a decision. Does he let go of Lively and protect the ship and Lively dies? Or does he stay with Lively, try to save Lively's life, and put the entire crew at risk? Jerry died when he was about 43 or 44 years old, and they invited me to come down and speak at his service. I was very good friends with this family, and I did. And I went down there and I talked to him about patriotism and love of country and right and wrong and God-fearing and things like that. And I asked how he died, and no one could tell me how he died. And I can tell you this, I don't know how he died, but I know when he died. He died when he left Lively on the floor of that helicopter and defended our craft. So split-second decisions are something that goes hand in hand with war. And I'm going to talk a little bit more about moral injuries and split-second decisions and how they cut right to the heart and the soul of a soldier that believes. PTSD is broken down into three major groups: acute, chronic, and delayed. Acute, and they're pretty self-explanatory. Acute is very intense for 6 months after the incident. So the incident happens, and for 6 months, it's bothering you. You're thinking about it. You're having nightmares. You can't relate. You can't do the job. You can't focus. You're angry. But then it subsides after 6 months. That's acute. Chronic is just as it says. Chronic is it lasts for more than 6 months, more than the 6 months that acute lasts. And then there's delayed. Delayed to me is the demon. Delayed can happen at any time, 5, 10, 15, I don't know how many years it can happen. But let me tell you about my brother Bill and a little bit about delayed PTSD. He called me one day, and I was single at the time. He called me and he said, "Jim," he said, "have you seen the movie Saving Private Ryan?" And I said, "No, Bill, I really haven't seen that. No." And he said, "Well, I know what you do. I know you work with young veterans that fight that war every day. You need to see that movie." And I said, "Okay, I'll watch it." And time went by, and I didn't avoid it, but I just didn't seek it out. And so he called me again and asked me the same questions. He said, "Jim, did you watch it?" And I said, "No, I didn't, Bill." And so he sent me a special edition DVD of that movie with Tom Hanks. So one Saturday morning, I thought, well, I don't have anything to do. Let's see what it's about. Put that movie in, and the first 30 seconds of that movie was hell. I mean, it was. I don't even know if I can describe it. The back of the boats went down. The U-boats. The first 5 or 6 rows were killed instantly. People were jumping off in water over their head with their pack, trying to hold their pack above their head and get to the shore. I turned it off, and I went down to the VFWs and I said, "Gee, tell me this is Hollywood. Tell me this didn't happen. Tell me it wasn't like this." And them old salty dogs said, "Yeah, Chancellor, that's exactly how it was." And the PTSD claims that the VA spiked after that movie came out. So we're talking about WW2 guys, 40, 50 years later, applying for disability because of that movie. Delayed is a demon. And so I'm going to talk to you a couple things about the symptoms of PTSD and what they can cause. Now, obviously, the two that I feel are the masterminds, so to speak, the things that everybody that drives everything else, and that's isolation and depression. Isolation and depression. When I come home from Vietnam, I was picked up at the airport and by my dad and my brother, and we came home and I sat down to the meal with my family, and my grandma was there, and a lot of hugs and kisses, and, "Oh, Jim, we're glad you're home. You made it. You made it. We're glad you're home." And I'm like, "Yeah, okay." We celebrated. And then I changed clothes, put some jeans on, and I went down to the tavern where I grew up. Walked right in the front door, and everybody's like, "Yay, Chancellor's here. He's going to play shortstop for us. He's going to bowl on our team on Friday night." And I said, wait a minute. Let me tell you where I've been. Let me tell you what I've done. Like, Chancellor, have a beer. And it was just pushed back in. And it's really, I didn't think anybody cared. And these were my lifelong friends. These are the friends that I grew up with, went to high school with. And all of a sudden it's like, hey, that's your problem. That's not my problem. I don't want to talk about it because I didn't go. I can't relate to you. So you're pushed back. And then all of a sudden you start to isolate because you wonder, well, maybe that's just the way it's going to be. Unless I can find another combat veteran to talk to, that's just kind of how it's going to be. And then you isolate. And then, here's what I did. I isolated. And then I used the same tactics to avoid reality at home as I used in Vietnam. You escape reality through drugs and alcohol overseas. You're in a fight. You're in a battle. You're in a war. And there's no timeouts. There's no, let's take a break. Let's talk about it. Let's put the other team in. It's not that way. It's fight or survive and survive. So when you get a chance and you get a chance to step away from that war, if you can step away from that war, whether it be with weed or drugs or alcohol, you do that. So now you come back home and you get pushed back into your own corner and you isolate, and then you start to get depressed. And then you think, I got to get out of here. I got to figure a way to get out of here. And you go right back to that same thing. What worked for me in Vietnam worked for me at home. I escaped reality through drugs and alcohol. So isolation and depression can push you and turn you and twist you down and down and down into suicide. Into suicide where you think, nobody wants to, nobody cares. Nobody wants to hear my story. What did I do this for? How am I ever going to feel good about myself? And so that's a possibility that they could push you down into depression so far that suicide becomes an issue. I'm going to touch on suicide just a minute, and then I'm going to go back to something else. But I'm on a mission right now to make suicide prevention mandatory as you ETS from the military. I'm just beginning this trek, but I think that it's very difficult. When you get out of the military right now, they'll say, if I'm serving with someone else and they say, Chancellor, if either one of you guys want to talk to a mental health professional, you got to go over there. Well, neither one of us are going to go. I'm not going to raise my hand. I'm not going to say, hey, I got some problems. I need to talk to somebody. And neither is this other person that I'm with. So it's optional and you can get it if you want it, but it needs to be mandatory. It needs to be seared into your soul. And I'll tell you, I know this works. And I'll tell you that because of my daughter. My daughter had a 4-year battle with drugs and alcohol, mostly drugs. And I talked to her till I was blue in the face. And she's fine now. She's a wonderful lady. She's married, got a couple kids and grandkids. But when I was talking to her, I thought, she's not hearing I'm just wasting my time. She's not hearing anything I'm saying. But then fast forward 10, 12 years later, she's talking to her son, and she's telling him the exact same things that I told her, almost verbatim. So even though she didn't outwardly receive it, I knew she did. I knew she did. So now, when a company comes home from war, battalion, company, whatever, they need to go through mandatory PTSD / moral injuries training, and they don't have to raise their hand. I'm not going to stand up there, or someone is not going to stand up there and say, all right, if you got problems, raise your hand, go over here. Nobody's going to do it. But if they all go through the same training, if they all get the same information and they take it with them, it might not do anything to their lives, might not do anything for the next life, but it might for the next one. If they recognize and see the symptoms of suicide, 2-3 generations down the road, it's worth it. We save one life, and it's worth it. But mandatory education, in my opinion, is a great starting point to curb this out of control epidemic. Now, I'm going to talk to you about moral injuries. PTSD is fear-based. Remember, we talked about that. It's fear-based. Moral injuries are injuries to your soul. We're a God-loving and God-fearing country, no matter how you believe. And we have an inner conscience, so to speak, and we're a God-fearing country. And a moral injury is an injury to your soul, an injury that something that has scarred you where it'll never go away. PTSD it will never go away either, but it's manageable. And moral injuries are manageable as well, but that knife cuts deep. And I'll give you a couple examples. One of a Marine in a city near Fallujah, and then another one of an experience that I had in Vietnam. This Marine, and I interviewed this Marine, he said he went into a tea section at a little town near Fallujah, and that wasn't Fallujah, but there was a small little town and that there was a tea section, and there was a firefight broke out. And they were receiving fire from the rooftops and the storefronts and just from everywhere. And the Marine said it lasted 40, 45 minutes until the helicopters got here. And once the gunships get there, they pretty much put the fire out. That fight was over. Then the Marine went in and to see what kind of recon and do some assessment. And he found the women that he killed. He found the women that the cowards that we fought held up as shields, hoping we wouldn't return fire. Now, I asked people about that. I talked to the Marine about that, and everyone says, well, he didn't know. He didn't know they were going to be there. No, he didn't know that time. But what about the next time? What about the next time he pulled into that T or he got into a firefight and he drew down his weapon to protect his ship? Did he fire or does he not? Because if he fires, there's going to be collateral damage. If he doesn't, he could lose his own life plus that of the crew. Split-second decisions in war. Remember the one I told you about, Jerry? And this one as well. Now I'll tell you about what happened to me in Vietnam. We were in a free fire zone. Now, a free fire zone is one where if you receive fire, you don't have to call in for coordinates and you don't have to get permission to return fire. You just return fire. If you receive fire, you can return fire. So Steve Warren is flying my ship and we're low leveling across the tops of the trees and we receive fire from this village. There's probably 5 or 6 hooches in this village and they're the straw hooches that you see on TV. They're just like that. And so I returned. Steve banked the ship like this and I restarted the return fire. And as I did, I saw that I could set the hooches on fire with my tracers. So a tracer is a bullet that glows red so you can see where you're shooting. So with that tracer, I could set that hooch on fire. So that's what I did. I burned down the hooches. And I gave up. I took a lot of lives. I did as much carnage as I possibly could to that entire village. Simply because I could. Simply because I was told it was a free fire zone. So I go home. I go to the hooch where at night where we all go, and I walk in and I'm John Wayne. I got my M60 on the back of on my shoulder, and I walk in. And I say, hey, let me tell you what I did today. I really took it to the bad guys. Well, then I told that story, and this old dog named Cheney said, sit down, Chancellor. Let me tell you what you really did. He said the VC fight in packs. So there might be 6, 10, 12, however many in a pack. They'll go into a village. They're the only ones that have guns. So if it doesn't matter if there's 40 or 50 people in that village, they don't have a weapon. So the VC control everything in that village. Now your helicopter came by. They shot a couple clicks at your helicopter. Then they left. They left the village. The bad guys are gone. All that's left are innocent people, fathers and uncles and grandpas, and people that just wanted peace. So Cheney said, Chancellor, did you really take it to the bad guys? And as I walked away, I just got up. I didn't even answer him. I just got up and started to walk back towards my hooch and my bunk, and I could feel the tears in my eyes. I could say, it's the same thing that I wondered about. Is this war? Is this what it's about? Did they have to die? I don't know. I don't know. I want to tell you about a tent revival, and then we're going to move on to homelessness and some other issues. I was asked to speak at a tent revival, and me being a city boy, I didn't really know exactly what that meant. So I have a suit on, and I go to where I'm supposed to go, and everybody there's got jeans, and they got a horse. So this is a tent revival, and it's a huge tent. And I talked to him, and when I got done speaking, I said, I want to ask you a question that I can't answer, a question that I don't have the answer to, and maybe you can help me. So they said, go ahead. And I said, do I have to ask for forgiveness for what I've done? And one of the pastors said, well, what do you mean? I said, well, do I have to ask God for forgiveness for what I've done? He goes, oh, God's an all-loving, all-forgiving. Of course he'll forgive you. And I said, that's not the question. The question is, do I have to ask for that? Do I have to ask to be forgiven? Or did I just follow orders? Did I just simply do what I was supposed to do? And God will forgive me for that. And the pastor shot back and he goes, I believe it says in the Bible that we're going to be governed by a higher power. And I think that means the government. And I said, yeah, I've heard that. And I've also heard that you're guided by your conscience. So I couldn't answer that question. I left that day. They got around me and they laid hands on me and they prayed and they said, it's going to be okay, Jim. One day you'll know it's going to be okay. Well, as I speak to you tonight, I really don't know. I know God forgives me. I know God loves me. But do I have to ask for forgiveness for what I did when ordered by another man? Now let's talk about homelessness for a minute. As I talked about the American Veterans Collection, we do as much as we can, and we'd welcome more. But we do as much as we can for homelessness and suicide and different programs. One year we really went after the homeless. We had news articles, not that they read the paper, but we had some. Do you know somewhere, or do you have any idea where we can reach them or find them? And I rode in the back of a police car on a night shift and went under bridges and tried to find people. And there's a portion of homeless people that just don't want help. They just don't want help. One guy actually talked to me and he said, the true meaning of homelessness, the true meaning of freedom is homelessness. No NIPSCO bills, no anything. And I found that to be true. And there's two segments. There's people that are in situational poverty that are homeless only because it's a situational thing. They broke an arm, they got sick, they lost their job. That person is going to claw his way out of that hole and take every opportunity that's presented to him. The other person, which I'm going to talk about in just a second, is a person that is comfortable in their life. They're comfortable where they're at. They've stayed on the street so long that they're actually delusional about the government, about, anti-government things. They're actually delusional about life. So I went to, I was told that the homeless that hung out at a place in East Chicago, a McDonald's on Indianapolis Boulevard in East Chicago. So I went over there and I said, I'm not dumb. I'm not going to walk out there and say, hey, I'm Jim Chancellor. Let me help you, because that would never work. So I just got there and I had a cup of coffee and I left the brochure on the table and I left. And then I had volunteered to serve in a soup kitchen at St. John Bosco's in Hammond for lunch. And I went there and lo and behold, here come the same group of people that were at McDonald's. They were at the church for the free hot meal at St. John's. And the number had grown. And when I watched them, there was actually a pecking order in this group of homelessness. Then that night they were at the church. I spoke at the church and I begged people, tell me what we can do. Help me. Tell me what we can do. Let me help you. I'm not going to help you, but let me help you help you. And they were the same group there then. And, I tried to talk to them, and they're like, I'm going to put a banana in here, and I got an apple over here, and I'll see you. I'm fine. They're off. They're off into the night. They're gone. The turnout was good. What we did was we sent buses out on the weekends and brought them back in. We gave them everything from new clothes to food, and I actually gave them a cell phone. We paid for so many minutes in advance, and before they left, I said, here's a cell phone. I want you to take this, and if you ever get in need, you got to call me. If you ever want, because a lot of people, they don't want to hear it. They don't want to hear about the opportunities. And opportunity is what changes your life. When you receive the right opportunity and you want to change, then you will change. But they took it, and there was probably 35 maybe there over the number of weekends we were there, and I didn't get another call. No one had called me back. So they were satisfied, and they were comfortable in that zone. So homelessness is a tough nut. Some people don't want help. And there's times during the wintertime that I take distress calls from the DAVs and American Legions and the VFWs. And I love that. I love when someone is in need and my name gets thrown out and they say, call Jim Chancellor. Call Chancellor. But, sometimes in the wintertime when there's a bad storm coming, they'll call me and they'll say, hey, Chancellor, just get me off the streets for this storm. Get me off the streets for the weekend. And I don't want to hear about your programs. I already know about your programs. You told me about them 100 times. I'm not interested in that. You just need to get me off the street for this storm. That's all they needed. That's all they wanted. Now, while we still have a little bit of time left, I want to talk to you about our Lake County Veterans Treatment Court. The Veterans Treatment Court is a court where we work with veterans of all ages who might have struggled and, got in some trouble, made some bad decisions. And it's an 18 to 24 month program. And once you complete the program, you have your charges are expunged. They're completely expunged. I'd love to share some details with you about this. Judge Cantrell is the judge that rules the court, so to speak. I'm a bailiff in the court system. I almost think that the people that are in the court system are very lucky. They're luckier than the people on the street. The people in the court system, they have every opportunity to change their lives. They have educational opportunities, opportunities for employment, food, anything they want. And the guy on the street, that 40-year-old guy busting his butt every day, just trying to make a living, he doesn't know those opportunities. I believe education and opportunities are the keys to a better future for our young people.